There was, you guessed it, another crazy ending to a Knicks Pistons game in this first round series. The Knicks lose 106 to 103 on their home floor to take this thing to a game 6 in Detroit. I'm getting into it right now with my buddy Stacy Patton from the Strickland.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And I wanted to remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today, I will be joined by my buddy Stacy Patton from The Strickland and of Pod Strickland, the flagship Strickland podcast there. So definitely check him out at Stacy Patton 89 on Twitter if you want to give him a follow and have some great basketball discussion. But we got some great basketball discussion coming up on today's show. We're going to be talking about the 106-103 loss by the Knicks to the Pistons. Talk about what went wrong in this one. Tibbs's mismanagement of timeouts down the stretch, unfortunately, ends up kind of costing the Knicks this game as Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart get subbed out for injury and then are able to check back in with 2 minutes to go in this game, and yet had to wait until under 30 seconds to get back into this thing as the Knicks' hopes just kind of dwindled away in that amount of time. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about whether the Knicks are ready to beat the Pistons here, whether the talent discrepancy means that like this should not be as big of an issue. And then also just kind of where Tibbs's job is sitting right now in terms of how far this series goes. If the Knicks lose, if the Knicks get embarrassed by Boston in the next round, we have a nice discussion coming up about the Tibbs of it all as well. But I also just want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. But we appreciate you making it part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And without further ado, I'm going to get into it right now with Stacy Patton. So the Knicks lose 106 to 103. Chance to close their first game on the Garden floor to close a playoff series since 1999. And still can't get that magical closeout game on the Garden floor. I'm joined by Stacy Patton. You might know him as at Stacy Patton 89 on Twitter, of the Strickland, of Pod Strickland. Definitely go check that show out. I think he's actually recording that immediately after this. So check that out after you're done listening to this today. Stacy, I think this was a sort of a bungled finish for the Knicks here. Tibbs a little too loose with the timeouts down the stretch of this game, which then puts the Knicks in this awkward situation where both Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson go down with, I think it was with about 3 minutes left. They both go down with apparent injuries. They both get subbed out. They both go out and get treatment, and then both are ready to check in at about the 2 minute mark. They walk back out to the scorer's table, and then Tibbs, with only one timeout left, having burned one of his final two to sub those two guys out, sits on it for a minute and a half. The Pistons open up a 6-point lead during that time, and that was kind of all she wrote, despite a miracle three from McHale, followed by a miracle three by OG to put the Knicks in position to have a chance to win this thing in the final seconds. But really, when you're talking about a guy who the prevailing, thing people have been talking about with him is how great he is in the crunch time, because he's the best scoring player in the fourth quarter in the entire NBA right now. One of the best guys since like Michael Jordan, popping up on best crunch time scorer lists. Like, you don't have him for a minute and a half of the final 2 minutes, even with the game that he was having where he wasn't playing well. It's kind of just a mismanagement of what assets you have within a game. And I feel like it was kind of, unfortunately, a quintessential Tom Thibodeau game in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it was what 90 seconds of game time, I think, something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
2 minutes to about 27
And they're
seconds.
on
Yeah.
the. I mean, that had to be the most for me. That was the most excruciating thing. They keep showing Hart and Brunson at the score stable. I love campaign. I love Deuce. It's not a reflection on them. Those aren't like campaign got his. Even if you want to say they can still get good shots, campaign got his signature floater on one of those possessions, and he bricked it horribly. Like there's these guys aren't in the game at those situations for a reason. And if you have the ability to get Jalen Brunson in, especially, but also Hart, who has been really big, um, it's just it's very baffling. And I get Tibbs' explanation after the game was, they did have fewer timeouts, but they still ended up in, even with that, they ended up in a position at the end of the game where they wanted to advance the ball and they couldn't. And Deuce somehow got the ball there. Not like you can say they're going to key in on Brunson, fine. You didn't give it to Bridges. I don't think Hart was in the game. You didn't give. I mean, OG's decision making is its own thing, but you allow Deuce to get the ball, and he can't really like. The idea there would be to make a pass quick enough so Detroit can't just foul him, right? It was baffling. And look, here's the thing, right? Like, there's going to be people. I think you can come down on a few different ways on this series right now. Let's face it, on talent. I mean, I'll those to you, Alex. On talent, if you're looking at these rosters on paper, or even how they've performed this season, should it be 3-2 right now?
I mean, that's two totally different questions, right? Because on talent, it shouldn't be. And on paper, it it should almost arguably be the other direction based off how they played down the stretch of the season, right? Like, I think on paper, the biggest worry going into the series was like, or on paper in terms of like what the numbers were telling you, not like what just the roster was. Like on paper, you were like, the Pistons have just been a better team in the back half of the season than the Knicks are. They've been a better offense, a better defense, playing more up to the level of higher level competition than the Knicks are. And, the Knicks basically from January 1st on were like a middle of the pack team in the NBA in both respects. Like, I think that we saw sort of in games 2 and 3, especially, or sorry, games 3 and 4, especially, my mistake, games 3 and 4, especially, like just sort of that talent sometimes just wins out. Like, they could do whatever they want and Tibbs can coach however he wants, but like Jalen Brunson sometimes is just going to score you 15 points in the fourth quarter. And
Cat is going to hit an insane.
Right. Cat's going to hit 2 insane shots in a row. And I mean, he even, to his credit, hit another one of those tonight, which was crazy. Got me jumping out of my seat. Like, he can just decide on a dime that he wants to hit it from 7 feet back from the 3-point line on any given possession and just like can that thing. So, that's where like the overall just like talent discrepancy kicks in. If the Knicks were playing and being coached up to the level that their talent level suggests, like, yeah, the series should be over today. It maybe should have been over last game. And I mean, that's not a discredit to the Pistons, but they're kind of just like, it's obvious they're still kind of green around the gills. Like, they're not quite like there yet. They're not quite ready to, be like finish a game in crunch time and, deal with playoff basketball in that way.
And we saw that, right? We
right.
saw that. And some of that is, I think Bridges and Cat failing to get that loose ball off the inbounds where Cade made a bad pass. Cade made the pass right on the inbounds, I think. And it was Schroeder who. So you can, but that's the thing, right? To your point, right? Yeah. So paper was maybe too broad. Like, if these teams are performing at a relatively similar rate, despite the talent gap, you would have to argue one of like 3 different things, right? One, the roster is not a good fit for each other. 2, the coach is unable to make the roster work as it's constructed. Or 3, he can't motivate the players, right? That's the last thing. People will say, well, have that heart, like, no pun intended, get that loose ball if you're Mikal Bridges. I think both of the latter two point to the coach, and I just don't buy the first one yet, because this is a team that their identity, like the way they are constructed, is to be a team that should shoot a lot of threes, that should play fast, that should share the ball, that should make every player a threat at every single second of the game when you have the ball, right? Everyone should be accounted for. That's not the result, right? We see that somehow more, even when the Pistons are playing Duran and Osar Thompson together, who are both non-shooters, we see them being utilized a little bit more as threats than Hart, who is a better shooter than both of them, to be honest, right? He's a more effective offensive player, certainly, than Osar. Duran's a different thing because he's big. So it's tough to not come away from this series feeling like, and like I do want to caveat it by saying I'm not saying like, oh, the Knicks should win every game by 20 and sweep this team. I think a team built like Detroit, we've seen this. Miami has done this for years, right? Well, not yesterday, but for the most part, Miami has overachieved because they play this style. They are very physical. They play really hard defense. They know they're not going to call. I'm not even blaming the refs. What I'm saying is, in the playoffs, like, you're a football fan too, right? The Seattle Seahawks defense was built on the premise that they're not going to call pass interference in every play. So do it, right? And I can't blame them. And that's what a lot of fans want. So I'm not even, but I'm saying that that's not what the Knicks are. The Knicks are built a different way, and Tibbs is having them play a different style. And, it's a mismatch, right? So do the Knicks have an identity? Yes, I think they have mental toughness. I think they have a lot of offensive talent. I think they have good defensive talent. But right now, the way it seems like they are trying to play is not in line with what they're built to do.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you bring that up because I was having similar thoughts last night. You bring up last night's games, and outside of the Heat getting absolutely destroyed by the Cavs, there was also the Warriors game, and I was watching that game, and like this late stage, less talented overall Warriors team than what the greatest Warriors teams were, still manages to work just on the fact that they have a player who, frankly, I don't care what anyone says, like Jalen Brunson is maybe the closest player to a Steph Curry in the league right now, like in terms of style of play, in terms of what he can bring you both on and off the ball. Like he's pretty damn close, like at his best, honestly. And especially with the off the ball stuff where he's very adept at moving without the ball, very good at catch and shoot like Steph is and whatever. And it was so funny because I was watching down the stretch of that game, and by design, by Houston, like Houston was blanketing Steph, and yet the Warriors didn't like implode because of it. They didn't fall apart. They instead just started working the ball around more, and then the ball would maybe find its way to Steph for an attempt here and there, but they had backup plans and they had guys constantly in motion. They had guys working their way around the perimeter constantly and like trying to, get hit for movement shots and whatever. And I understand that not every player on the Knicks is like this elite movement shooter or whatever. Like I don't really think OG is great at like
I've seen the Warriors succeed though with Gary Payton, Butler, and Draymond on the floor at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Which like the Knicks can't even figure it out with Josh Hart. Like,
and all three are worse shooters than Jimmy has the mid range, so it's a little bit complicated. But like from 3-point range, Josh Hart is objectively a better shooter than those guys.
Yeah, and they make it work somehow. And it's like, OG Anunoby might not be like Klay Thompson in terms of being able to like catch it on the move and shoot it or whatever, but like Mikal Bridges, I think has shown in recent games like he's a better movement shooter than the Knicks have used him for.
Well, he's a better movement shooter than he is wide open.
A stationary shooter, yeah, absolutely.
He's J.R. Smith. He's like the most sane J.R. Smith, I guess.
Exactly, like, the most sane J.R. Smith variant, right? If we're gonna like MCU it. All right, I'll be right back in with Stacy, continuing this discussion about the Game 5 loss for the Knicks, including why I think the Warriors actually were kind of a great template for the other night for how the Knicks could potentially operate in the future. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen under Tibbs, but talk a little bit about that and about some strategic adjustments that this team could make to hopefully get through this Pistons series. But first, I want to remind you all today's show is brought to you by Car Gurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the US. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. And I've been using Car Gurus for a while, honestly. For my last couple cars, I've used it to try to, first off, like I bought my last car kind of the end of COVID. So there was inventory issues. So I was using Car Gurus to just see like what was available in my area. Now I'm like kind of thinking about a new car again or a new used car. And I have a particular one in mind, and I've been looking on Car Gurus. I've found some pretty good ones. What's nice is that they give you a really good analysis of what the price is like compared to what other cars like that car are selling for, kind of tell you like, is this a good deal? Is this not a good deal? They're very good about that. So that's why I've been using it for years. I've used it for probably my last like 3 cars, my wife's last couple cars. Definitely, I love using Car Gurus when it's time to buy a car. So buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com. And today's show is also brought to you by Wayfair. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every budget. And I mean, I think I've been mentioning it. I just moved into a new place this year, so the projects never ending. It's like every weekend you think, oh, now I moved enough in, and then you're like, nope, some other project. Nope, I could probably use another shelf over here. I could probably use another piece of furniture over there. Especially, luckily, fortunate enough to have upsized. So, there's been a lot of trying to figure out how to fill rooms and stuff like that. So that's been what's great with Wayfair is that they offer all kinds of great furniture, and their fast and free shipping made it so easy. So there's no hauling heavy items from the store. Just bring it on in from outdoors. So Wayfair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. You watch what the Knicks are doing, and it's just like there's such a lack of creativity there, especially down the stretch of games. And what's funny is like they didn't even necessarily, well, I say they didn't necessarily run into it, but you sort of saw it in that stretch when they didn't have Brunson in there. It was like nobody knew what to do. It felt like completely unorganized basketball, and it almost felt like they were just running around like trying to wait for something to happen, like some calamity to stop the clock so that they could get Jalen Brunson in. Because even with still having Cat out there, it's like they weren't having Campaign come down and like run a pick and pop with Cat, which like would be the most,
Obvious
lowest common
thing.
denominator move. It's like, well, there's no Brunson out there, so you better find something to do. And like Campaign and Cat have been okay together throughout the year so far, so why not give it a shot? And like nothing. I don't know. I'm with you. It's uninspiring, and it does feel like this team just consistently does not play up to its own talent level. And again, I don't for as much crap as like on this podcast I've given like Pistons fans and whatever because I think they're annoying. And like the city throwing garbage at the refs or whatever, like I didn't think was fantastic, but
It's a fan base. Having lived there, it's a fan
yeah,
base that pays more attention to hockey and football than basketball.
it
That will,
tracks.
if that would explain a lot of the kind of
The antics.
yeah.
But either way, it's just, I don't even say this to knock the Pistons as a team who I think are legitimately like a team on the rise and like have good talent and played really well the back half of the season and everything. But it's just like if the Knicks had 3/4 of the coaching that a team like the Warriors has and 3/4 of the creativity on offense, I feel like they would just be in so much better shape at this point. But it is what it is in that regard, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's very frustrating, and like again, you don't want to take away from the Pistons. I think they would be annoying to like I really felt like the Knicks should have beat the Pacers. I think they do at full strength last year. They lost 4-1 to the Celtics, but they gave them a very hard time. There are certain styles that just put you in every game. The Pacers do it in the diametrically opposite way from the Pistons. Pacers do it by being able to just get high quality shots on every possession. But the Pistons, like, yeah, I think you see a lot of these teams overachieve, or at least you see the Magic. It was funny. The Magic leading the Celtics was like my one, like, okay, maybe this isn't the worst thing if the Celtics also have to go 6. The Celtics won by 31, so that one that didn't end well. But you see it that it's still very difficult, right? It's not just a pure talent equation. I mean, I want to get to your next point here on offense regressing big time. Is it really a regression? This is a good defensive team. The Knicks have mostly their best offense has been OG. It's really, can someone hit tough shots? We know Brunson can do that. OG, like that last possession at the end where OG just looked off Brunson and just took that 3 that went in. But that kind of says it, right? It's not great process. Like it shouldn't be hard. It always feels difficult. For most, like you have the 21-0 run. When they get in transition, it looks different, but it always feels so difficult. And this is a team built for offense, and I don't want to keep harping on the Tibbs thing, but it shouldn't be this hard for this team to score. And it can't be because they're not a great defensive team.
Well, and I think this is what I keep going back to, and if I say regression, it's like mostly in terms of I've been referencing this a lot lately, but basically, like when the Knicks were more or less like operating on instinct at the beginning of the year, like right after they got Cat, you go through the preseason. He only gets, he does play in all the preseason games, but he gets a limited camp because like the time it took for the deal to go final, whatever. He didn't really get to do training camp before the actual preseason games started, so they kind of just had to like learn each other's tendencies on the fly and all this other stuff. And they talked about it all at the beginning of the season. Well, that offense where they were just learning on the fly was the one that was like a top 2 offense in the NBA, and it actually was fantastic. And like what's funny is that they did so many just extremely simple things that are more or less unguardable with the personnel that they have, which was like just standard pick and pops with Cat and Brunson, doing like a horns pick and roll with Cat setting the first screen and then Hart setting the back screen, and then Hart like just blitzing towards the rim off of that, Cat popping. There was just so many options that they would do there. And then your bailout options of those would be both Mikhail and OG in the corners. And then they would get the ball. They would have the option of either because each of those guys had their favorite corner, which we don't see them in as much anymore either, but it made perfect sense to have them spacing the floor, each in their favorite corner. Because each one of those guys last year, at least, was like literally the top shot maker in the NBA from each of their respective corners, which is crazy. But they each have a corner that they love. So then you would kick it to one of them in their corner. They would either shoot it or pump fake it, put it on the floor, drive in. Maybe they get an open layup if a guy closes out too hard. Maybe the guy from the other guy's defender from the other corner cheats over to try to get the drop on you there. Then you kick it to the other corner, and then the other guy gets a wide open 3. That worked for like the first 2.5, 3 months of the season. And it was like, you could have just used that as your building block. And then instead it was like Tibbs was like putting together a Lego set, and, he starts building the first thing, and then all of a sudden just took all the bricks back apart as the season went on, and then just spread them apart, and then just walked away from the project. Like it just feels like they've essentially just said, okay, let's just go back to where we have Brunson bring it down. We'll maybe set a screen, but for the most part, it's like Brunson like having the option at least to just wave a guy off, start breaking his man down solo off the dribble and ISO, and then trying to find a kick out from there. And it's just not as efficient as using screens and stuff, which is like a core tenet of every top offense in the NBA. And it just seems like something that the Knicks are less inclined to do. And it's even odd that they've then sort of never really tried to embrace doing the too big thing, which at least in this series, I still think has been their best looks in this series because it allows them to play like offensive rebound ball a little bit more again. But even that they haven't been doing as much, and as a result, I think they've been kind of getting cooked on the glass in key moments too. So it's just a pretty rough look overall. Like I don't know, is there anything that you've been seeing like specifically that you think, hey, this might be something that could at least get them this series win? Because I'm almost at this point based off how things have gone in this series. And I mean, I kind of felt this way going in, and I felt this way even up 3-1, thinking the Knicks were probably going to close this thing out in 5. Like, I don't know if there's anything that this team can do right now with this coach that gets them past Boston or even takes more than a game or two off of Boston at this point. But, is there anything that you think that they could potentially be doing even to just escape this series in Detroit, or God forbid at Game 7 on Saturday at the Garden?
Well, there have been some encouraging signs when the Knicks have looked good, right? And they have had some good stretches. They're much more aggressive. I think their wings, especially Mikal. OG is just a defensive savant. That's probably something that doesn't get talked about enough. It gets talked about quite a bit. But especially Mikal, when you have him top blocking, when he's getting into guys and he's being physical, it's a very noticeable difference. I didn't think he did that as much tonight, and I think Cade had an easier time, particularly late in the game, getting to his spots. But I do think, to your point, the double. Everyone is like, "Well, Mitch can't guard against Boston. Why not?" Right? Some of it is just Porzingis is going to fade, but that applies to Cat too, right? I think Mitch was probably going to be better at recovering. When I say fade, I mean that KP is going to pop on those pick and pops. And for Mitch, that's a difficult cover. It's a difficult cover for anyone. Orlando has figured that out, so to speak. I don't think we'll have the same shooting luck with Porzingis just based on history. But we've seen Mitch play against Boston even this year, and it's looked better. And you get, to your point, that offensive rebounding. Now, if they want to put Al Horford and Porzingis out there, you got to deal with Mitchell Robinson. So I think that's one thing that gives me a little bit of hope. And when they've run those lineups, the fact that they've looked really good, the fact that when Cat plays more aggressively, when their wings play more aggressively, you give up some easy baskets. I'm not going to deny that. There have been too many easy baskets, but you're playing on your terms a little bit more, which I think you need to do against the Celtics. If they play on their terms, then you might as well show up. But I wanted to ask you this, in terms of how this series has gone, I still think the Knicks have been the better team in aggregate. It feels really bad at times. It does feel like the Pistons can get into their offense more smoothly, and the Knicks are basically relying on heroics, but that's part of it. Frank Barrett, friend of the Strickland, which you're very well acquainted with, and Prez, also from the Strickland. I was discussing with them, and they were like, Frank Barrett said, Jeff said that the Knicks, the Pistons have been the better team in 4 out of the 5 games. I can't get there because it matters that Brunson and Cat are those guys, and it matters that Cade can get a good look and brick it with the game on the line, and you have to cry about Tim Hardaway Jr. It matters, I think, that the game has largely been played on the Pistons' terms, and the Knicks have still won. And it's not like 3-point variance or foul luck has really favored either team. I think the Knicks have been the better team. It's just been a lot closer than you would expect.
All right, I'll be back in just a moment to finish my discussion with Stacy about this game 5, start looking towards game 6, and also have a little discussion about Tom Thibodeau and his job security, like how we're feeling if he happens to lose this series, if they get embarrassed against the Celtics in the next series, like where do we stand? Where should the organization stand? Where do we think the organization will stand? All kinds of good stuff still coming up there. But first, I want to remind you all that today's show is brought to you by Game Time, and there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you could be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. So the last-minute deals, that's a big deal, man. Like you saving up 60%, pretty solid. Like the fact that they keep tickets listed all the way up until when the game starts, you can just kind of on a dime. Great for baseball season, but maybe for those of you with the means and the ability and the desire, perhaps maybe fly out to Detroit for Thursday. Maybe try to do a little Detroit takeover. I'm sure there are going to be some Pistons fans that'll be throwing their tickets up on Game Time, or maybe they forgot to take them down or something. I don't know. Figure something out. Anyway, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, I think it's just kind of it comes down to like almost to bring it full circle to what we were talking about at the top. Like the Knicks talent level is higher. So there should have been at least one game in this series where they could have won by like I don't know 10 points or something. Like just let's just call it like a comfy win. And Kat even kind of alluded to that too. Like in his post game comments, I was actually just like I just saw thing. It was James Edwards tweeted this said ask Kat if the holes they get into starting the fourth is as concerning as the praise closing the games out in the fourth. He said we haven't found a way to get a commanding win. Like it's clearly something that they're talking about too. Like that they're thinking is like we just can't escape this like Detroit team. And look, maybe it's that the first 4 games of the series were officiated like an MMA match, and then like this one was officiated like I don't know. I don't even know what to relate it to. It's just it was an oddly
And
officiated game.
I'm not even saying it's today was oddly officiated, but yesterday, right? Or 2 days ago,
Mhm.
it was official. I'm not even complaining. It was officiated the same way on both ends.
Right.
I will say that favors the Pistons more because they're more that's just their identity more.
Well,
To
those a loosely officiated series is generally going to even the playing field for the team that has less like on paper talent. And that's borne fruit for Detroit. Like I think that they came into this series, it's obvious watching them and like how they're approaching this, like they kind of figured like their strategy was more or less to come in and set a tone by basically committing a lot of fouls and desensitizing the refs to it. Like, it's they're setting. I know that you brought up Prez. I know that he's been very vocal about this on Twitter. Like they're setting tons of moving screens and like shoving off on almost every screen. Um, I've been noticing the jersey pull has been like a huge move that they've been doing where it almost seems conscious, like they just decided to, start pulling guys' jerseys and try to, get them off their spot that way, and see what they could get away with. And then, obviously in game 4 or yeah, in game 4, like just the overall like ripping at guys' arms and whatever, and that started to just take place on both sides, which is why again, I think I'm with you where like the ending didn't bother me at all. It didn't make me feel dirty or anything, like knowing like, oh, well, Tim Hardaway was technically by the letter of the law fouled, like because so was Josh Hart below the basket right before that by Tobias Harris, who like shoved him, which made the rebound come dislodged, which made it even get to Hardaway in the first place and all that stuff. So it's like, I think that um in general, it's just kind of like the Knicks. Yeah, they're kind of playing. I don't want to quite say playing down to their competition, but like it feels like things should not be this close, and yet here they are. That said, I don't know if I would agree with the premise that I'm kind of with you on this, where I don't think that they've been necessarily outplayed in these games. Like I think they've been outplayed in game 2, and in the 2 games they lost, I think they've been outplayed. The games that they won, I think they won because they did ultimately in the end outplay the Pistons. Like you can invalidate the 21-0 run all you want in game 1 and say, well, it was only a run, and like for all the other minutes of the game, the Knicks got outscored by X number of points or whatever. It's like, yeah, but the team with a huge amount of talent went on a 21-0 run and actually put something together. So tough cookies if that doesn't vibe with you. And then, game 3 and 4, like Brunson coming through in the clutch and winning them the game, and Cat making the huge shots. It's like,
Well, game
well,
3, they were also up. Like, I mean, the Pistons hit a bunch of ridiculous shots.
yeah,
You had the whole fiasco with the free throw thing. Like,
yeah,
that game also wasn't as close as it ended up being, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's like I don't buy at all that they've been outplayed by and large for this series. I think that they've been I arguably outcoached at times. Although JB Bickerstaff has certainly had his low points too. So I saw that he had a little barb to Tibbs after the game, being like, because he got asked about Brunson and Hart not getting put back in. He was like, well, that's up to them to coach that or whatever. It's like felt kind of a little more pot shotty than you usually get from one coach to another. But
are you saying JB Bickerstaff goes beyond what should be said in press conferences, or
maybe, I don't know.
yeah, he's usually never complains, never says anything.
Never steps out of line in a press conference.
Total
Yeah.
class act.
Real class act. Yeah, exactly. But either way, yeah, if we're just talking about that overall premise, I don't really buy it. Like I don't think the Knicks have been all in all outplayed this series, because I think that ultimately the results of the games, they've been tight games and the Knicks have pulled it out. So that to me says they've outplayed them, because if you outplay them, you win. It's like all 48 minutes count. I don't really care if they get smoked for 20 minutes every game or whatever, as long as they win the other 28,
And like the 3-point shooting percentage, like you can say like, well, if they're shooting really hot from 3, that can swing it. They're getting great ref luck that can swing it. Those things haven't happened. These have just been really close games. And I think if you look at it, it's like, well, that's probably the Knicks shooting themselves in the foot more than getting lucky. I do want to touch on this last point. Can the Knicks close out in Detroit? I mean, for me, they won 2 games in Detroit. They have been better in Detroit than the MSG in this series. They're 1-2 now in MSG. So can they? Yeah, of course. It looks like it's going to be another close game. Detroit does not concede anything easy. I think they missed a lot of good looks that I think they'll hit. As much as we can blame Tibbs, especially I think for not calling timeout and bringing in Hart and Brunson, their offensive process and their process on both ends seemed to work for most of the game. So yeah, I mean, I think that I'm still reasonably confident.
I think I am too. I think if I was going to put it at a percentage, I'd say I'm probably 65-35, maybe 70-30, that I think that they'll
just go with 69, Alex. Come on.
All right, yeah, 69-31. I like that. Yeah, we'll go with that. 69-31, that they're going to pull it out in Detroit. I think they can do it. Oddly, I almost feel more confident in that game than if it goes to a potential game 7, because I feel like if it goes to a game 7, Detroit has the momentum. They clearly are enjoying playing in MSG, maybe more so than the Knicks, weirdly, who just seem to like want to play their most bland version of basketball there, and are playing. They honestly played way more creative and like way better in Detroit for the most part, and embraced their strengths more. Maybe not for the full 48 minutes, but as you said, enough to like build double-digit leads and like get out in transition and everything else. And they kind of just got derailed like in game 4, for example, by the fact that like the tone shifted in the third quarter and a lot less was being called on the inside. And so they just started getting beat up on the inside. And then Detroit was getting out in transition, whatever. Either way, I feel fairly confident they can pull it out in game 6, but annoying nonetheless. So we have to have the conversation because I really did think this game was winnable. And yeah, it's unfortunate that we're there. But I'll to close things off, since probably won't see you again for on this show, at least for this series. What do you think at this particular juncture in time? Are you thinking Knicks in 6, Knicks in 7, or Pistons in 7? Where are you thinking? Where's your head at?
I'm still a Knicks in 6. I think they're the better team. I think they've played better in big moments, even tonight. They had. I think if Hart and Brunson don't have the freak injury, I think they win. Regardless of how it was handled. So I still feel like they win the next one. Yeah. I mean, let me throw this back to you. I know this is putting you on the spot. If it goes 7, or if the Knicks lose, so there's 2 scenarios. It goes 7, they just go 4 straight sweep with Boston, where they just don't look like they belong on the floor, or they lose. Is Tom Thibodeau back next year?
I mean, if they lose to Detroit, he better not be. Like, if they lose in the first round, that's a step back. And this team did not invest all the money and everything that they did to take a step. The money, the draft picks, the everything that they did this past offseason to take a step back. Like, if anything, you have to at least get to where you were last year and the year before, which is the second round. So if Tibbs is not able to get them there, then yes, he has to go. Like, that's an instantaneous decision. If they get embarrassed by Boston in the next round, I think it's also an instantaneous decision, because I don't think that you built this team to get embarrassed by Boston. You built this team to try to compete with Boston, which I think they did a better, at least in the regular season. We don't know the postseason yet, but last year they did a better job competing with Boston in the regular season than they did this year, despite having a roster that was better equipped to deal with them this year. So my inclination is, I mean, I almost see no scenario where I would not fire Tibbs after this postseason, because I just don't think that there is. Let's just put it this way: there is no realistic thought in my brain that says that the Knicks would take even like 2 games off of Boston right now, because if they're having this much of a struggle with getting by Detroit, I just don't think that they're going to get by them. And that would have been my answer, to be clear. Like, I was more braggadocious the other day because it was more fun having the Knicks be up like 3-1 and whatever, and like about to advance, hopefully. But like, that's been my stance this whole postseason. It's like, I don't think that they're built to compete with Boston, and it mostly starts at the head coach this year. And I think this roster is kind of being done a disservice by having a coach that, as you said, on paper, this roster fits together pretty good, and like play styles, they fit together well. They're kind of just being held back by the fact that like the coach isn't doing things to utilize them properly. And I feel like they deserve more of a fair shake with a coach that can utilize them a little better.
Yeah, I think given he just signed his extension, I agree with you. I'm at the same assessment on a personal level, but I don't think
the extension means much, if I'm being honest. It's just money. Like, there's no salary cap for coaches. So what do they care if they pay Tibbs some money? If anything, like, tell me what you think about this little conspiracy theory, like, or whatever. I had this thought recently where I was like, why would Leon even care in that case? Like, all he's doing is spending James Dolan's money. Dolan ostensibly does not care about that. Like, he would just be like, whatever, like, yeah, I'm gonna complain to the league that I'm not making enough money off MSG anymore or whatever. But like, I want this basketball team to win. So like, get me a winning coach. I'll pay Tibbs whatever the hell. And then Leon's conscience is kind of clear, because he's like, you know what, whatever. At least I got Tibbs' extension, and he'll get paid for like 4 more years and get like $10 million a year.
They could also move him to like a front office position, right? So
I don't know if I would want that based off how things went in Minnesota and whatever. But yeah, sure.
No, I mean, like, it's like Tony putting Uncle Junior, you're the boss.
Yeah, it could work. That could work. Give him a title.
If anyone can figure it out, it's Leon. I do think, like, if they look if they win in 6 against Detroit and they're just not ready for Boston, I think they would give Tibbs another year and maybe give him a stern talking to about maybe how he's managing the roster. But I'm with you in terms of the like how I view it. So
Yeah.
I just think this is not the roster he wants to coach.
But that's not up to him. So he's got to adapt or die basically at that point. So it's his choice. But either way, I think we've talked this one to death. This game sucked. Stacy, do you want to remind everybody where to find you online and everything, and then we'll call it quits for this game.
Yeah, you can find me at Stacy Patton 89 on the website formerly known as Twitter. I will plug all the great work at the Strickland, run by our editor-in-chief, who you can see next to me here. And, the recap will still be good. Matt Miranda and Colin are great. So it'll be good catharsis. We also had a few really good pieces outside of the recaps we're checking out. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing my job for me and plugging our lovely website. Yeah, definitely check out the strict.land. But yeah, till next time, thank you all for listening. We'll be back with something tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe I assume there's going to be lots of Detroit fan comments in this. Maybe I'll just do a little comment roast again. That was pretty nice and cathartic last week. Anyway, we got one more episode then, and another game on Thursday. So keep your ears out. We'll have you covered here on Locked On Knicks. But until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody. Sick. All right. Cool.